So, I want you to imagine for just a second that you are standing right on the edge of a Hollywood red carpet. Just, picture it in your mind's eye.
Oh, yeah, the chaotic energy, right?
Exactly. The air is practically vibrating with this, frantic electric energy. You have these blinding, relentless camera flashes going off like strobe lights everywhere.
And the paparazzi are just desperately shouting over each other, trying to get a sight line.
Right, and you've got the pristine designer gowns that honestly cost more than most people's homes, the perfectly tailored tuxedos. But most of all, you have the smiles.
Ah, yes. The megawatt smiles.
Yeah, these flawless million-dollar smiles that just seem to project this aura of absolute untouchable invincibility. It's basically the ultimate masterfully crafted illusion of human perfection.
It really is a masterclass in projecting an image.
But I want you to take that image, that perfect glossy magazine cover in your head, and just completely shatter it for a second. Because what if the person flashing that brilliant smile, waving to the crowd, is secretly fighting a devastating, fatal disease the very second they step out of the public eye?
Oh, wow. Yeah?
Or, on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, what if that beloved, wholesome hero you see on the screen, the one you've admired since you were a kid, is actually an absolute nightmare to everyone around them behind closed doors?
And that incredible dissonance is exactly what we are unpacking today.
It is.
Because we're looking at this massive, often shocking gap between the carefully curated public persona and the deeply hidden private reality. I mean, it's a duality that essentially defines the modern machinery of fame.
Let's unpack this. We have this incredibly dense, thoroughly researched stack of documents today for this deep dive. And it really pulls back the velvet curtain on the private lives of over 50 of the world's biggest celebrities.
Yeah, we are talking about household names here, global icons.
Exactly. And the mission of our deep dive today is to explore two very distinct, very dark sides of this Hollywood coin. On one side, we're looking at the heartbreaking, completely hidden health battles these stars are desperately trying to conceal.
Right.
And on the other side, we were dissecting the scandalous, sometimes downright abusive behaviors that absolute unchecked fame just allows to fester in the shadows.
And we need to be really clear right from the jump. We aren't just reading down a list of gossip.
No, not at all.
We are going to connect the underlying dots here. We want to understand the psychology, the biology, and the actual industry mechanics at play. Why is the Hollywood facade so utterly impenetrable?
And why do we as a society just buy into it so eagerly?
Exactly. And most importantly, what is the profound human cost of maintaining that illusion? Both to the celebrities themselves and, the everyday people who have to work in their shadow.
The human cost.
Yeah.
That is the absolute perfect place to start. Because when we talk about invincibility, our minds naturally go to the action heroes, right?
Oh, for sure. The titans of the screen.
Yeah, the ones who have built their entire global brands, their empires, on being physically unstoppable. And what jumps out immediately in the research is the jarring contrast of stars known for absolute physical prowess, whose bodies have completely betrayed them. Let's look at Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman is a profoundly fascinating starting point for this conversation. I mean, when you think of Morgan Freeman, you think of ultimate authority.
Yeah, he's literally cast as the voice of God.
Precisely. He has that majestic demeanor, that deep, resonant, unshakable composure. But behind that stoic exterior, he has been waging this relentless battle with fibromyalgia.
Right.
Now, to understand the weight of this, we really have to look at the causality. Back in 2008, he was involved in a horrific car crash that resulted in severe nerve damage to his left hand.
Which is just awful.
It is. And fibromyalgia, it's a chronic pain condition, but it's not just a lingering ache. It fundamentally alters the way the brain and the spinal cord process pain signals. It amplifies them.
Wait, so his body is basically overreacting to everything.
Yeah, exactly. So for over a decade and a half, he has been enduring intense systemic chronic pain, particularly in his arm, to the point where he frequently has to wear a compression glove just to manage the unrelenting discomfort.
I've seen him wear that glove in interviews and at award shows, and you almost just write it off as an eccentric fashion quirk.
Right, because of who he is.
Yeah. Or you don't even process it at all because his presence is so commanding.
And that is the illusion of composure at work. You don't process it because he doesn't allow you to see the suffering. He projects complete calm. But the reality is this invisible, exhausting burden.
It's gotta be so draining.
It really is. Fibromyalgia drains your energy reserves. To summon the energy to perform, to hit your marks, to deliver those iconic monologues while your nervous system is essentially on fire, requires a monumental act of compartmentalization.
That's wild. And then you contrast that quiet, chronic pain with someone like Hugh Jackman. I mean, we were talking about the man who defined Wolverine.
Oh, absolutely.
The guy with the bulging muscles, the feral energy, the literal on-screen superhuman healing powers. Yet, the reality is that he has repeatedly battled skin cancer.
Basal cell carcinoma, yeah.
Right. He's had to have multiple surgeries, primarily on his nose. And the documentation describes him as this silent warrior against a cruel disease, noting that the repeated treatments have left scars not just on his body, but deeply on his psyche.
The psychological dissonance there is what we really need to examine. Because consider what it means to have your identity, your brand, built entirely on the concept of cellular invulnerability.
Wolverine literally cannot be destroyed.
Right. His cells regenerate instantly. Yet the man playing him is constantly facing the fragility and mutation of his own cellular structure. Every single recurrence of that cancer is a terrifying reminder of his own mortality.
It's like Superman suddenly waking up to find his own skeleton is made of kryptonite. Your foundational strength is compromised. But I want to push on this a bit. Does playing that invincible hero actually make the reality of physical illness harder to accept?
Psychologically speaking, yes. When millions of people reflect a specific image back at you every single day, an image of absolute virility, it becomes very difficult not to internalize that as your baseline reality.
So you start to believe your own myth.
Exactly. You buy into the hype. So when the biological reality of disease strikes, it's not just a health crisis. It manifests as a deep identity crisis. You feel like you are failing the character. You know?
And failing the fans.
Right. And you are forced to hide your fear because your fear contradicts the product you are selling.
Which makes the situation with Val Kilmer hit incredibly hard. We're looking at the absolute masculine icon of the 80s and 90s.
Top Gun. Batman.
Yeah, he was the definition of swagger and cool. But in 2015, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. And the devastating treatments, the radiation, the chemotherapy, and ultimately a tracheostomy severely affected his breathing.
And it completely stole his iconic voice.
Right. He's had to use incredibly advanced AI technology just to recreate his voice for recent projects, like that Top Gun Maverick sequel.
And that perfectly illustrates the specific cruelty of these illnesses. I mean, for an actor of Kilmer's caliber, the voice is not just a tool. It is the primary instrument of their emotional expression.
Think of his delivery in Tombstone. I'm your Huckleberry.
Exactly. For him to lose the physical mechanism that helped define his cultural footprint, it is a devastating, traumatic loss of agency. The reliance on AI is this fascinating, almost dystopian bridge between his immortal screen legacy and his incredibly vulnerable mortal reality.
It's so visceral. I mean, these physical ailments are somewhat visible if you look closely. You can see Freeman's glove, Jackman's bandages, you hear the change in Kilmer's breathing.
Right.
But the physical betrayal is only the first layer. The documentation takes us into something much darker. What happens when the disease doesn't just attack the body, but fundamentally steals the very essence of a performer's identity?
This is where we move from physical betrayal to cognitive and neurological theft. And the irony here is almost unfathomably cruel. It's as if the diseases were precision engineered to destroy what these people do best.
Let's look at the singers first. Celine Dion and Linda Ronstadt. We're talking about two of the greatest, most powerful voices in human history.
Undeniably.
Celine Dion is battling stiff person syndrome. It's this incredibly rare neurological condition that is literally robbing her of her ability to move, causing muscle spasms so severe they can literally break her own bones.
Wow.
And agonizingly, it's robbing her of her ability to sing. And Linda Ronstadt, completely silenced by Parkinson's disease or potentially progressive supranuclear palsy, which entirely destroyed her vocal coordination.
To truly grasp the tragedy here, we have to understand the mechanics of what is happening neurologically. Singing at the elite level requires an incredibly complex symphony of neurological firing.
It's not just opening your mouth.
Oh, no, not at all. It involves microscopic adjustments in breath control, precise tension of the vocal cords, muscular support of the diaphragm. Stiff person syndrome targets the pathways that inhibit muscle contraction.
So it basically tells the muscles to flex, but never to relax.
It essentially floods the muscles with signals to contract, yeah. For a singer whose entire art form relies on fluid, relaxed, perfectly controlled movement, This disease is a targeted assassination of her life's work.
That is just awful.
The documentation notes that Celine Dion has been transformed into someone who struggles with basic movements, let alone hitting a high note. And for Linda Ronstadt, the neurological musician playing the instrument has been disabled. The brain simply can no longer communicate the precise timing required to sustain pitch.
A singer losing her voice. It's an absolute Greek tragedy. And then we see communicators losing their words. The research dives deeply into Bruce Willis and Wendy Williams.
Yes.
Bruce Willis, stepping away from a legendary acting career due to aphasia, which later progressed to frontotemporal dementia, or FTD, and Wendy Williams, a titan of daytime television.
Someone whose entire massive empire was built on talking incredibly fast.
Exactly, being sharp, quick-witted, spilling the tea. And she is sidelined by early-onset dementia and aphasia to the point where she was placed under legal guardianship.
What is fascinating and deeply terrifying is understanding what aphasia and FTD actually do to the human brain. Aphasia specifically attacks the brain's language centers. You might know exactly what you want to say. The thought is perfectly formed,
But you just can't get it out.
right? The neurological bridge between that thought and the physical articulation of the spoken word is destroyed.
So you are literally trapped inside your own head.
Precisely. For Wendy Williams, whose brand rested on verbal dominance, or Bruce Willis, whose career was built on quick-witted dialogue, to find themselves in a state where language is inaccessible is profoundly isolating.
And FTD is even worse, right?
Yeah, FTD goes further. It attacks the frontal and temporal lobes. It doesn't just take the words, it alters personality, behavior, and executive function. It slowly, systematically strips away the self.
I want to pause right here and ask you, the listener, to really internalize this for a second. Think about your own life. How much of your identity, your self-worth, is tied to what you do?
That's a great question.
Whether you are a programmer writing code, a teacher explaining concepts, a builder working with your hands, imagine your greatest talent, the thing that makes you you, being slowly turned off like a dimmer switch.
That imagery is chilling.
You are completely aware that the light is fading, but your hand cannot reach the switch to turn it back up. How would you cope with that absolute loss of self?
That is the exact existential terror these individuals are waking up to every single day. And what we see in the documentation is that people react to this terror in vastly different ways.
Some retreat, understandably.
Right, but others manage to channel that terror into fierce advocacy. This is beautifully highlighted in the stories of the Parkinson's warriors.
Yes, the resilience here is staggering. We're talking about Michael J. Fox, Ozzy Osbourne, Alan Alda, Neil Diamond, all battling Parkinson's.
And Michael J. Fox's story is particularly striking. He was diagnosed in 1991 at only 29 years old.
At the absolute peak of his career, Back to the Future, Family Ties.
Exactly. What we see with him is a masterclass in psychological resilience and narrative control. Parkinson's causes a massive drop in dopamine, leading to tremors and a loss of motor control. But instead of retreating, Fox transformed his personal tragedy into a highly visible crusade.
He publicly disclosed it in 1998 and just started pushing for a cure. He's raised over $1 billion for research.
He absolutely refused to let the disease dictate his narrative entirely. But, and this is a crucial distinction in the research, his optimism does not negate his suffering.
Right, the heroism doesn't erase the agony.
Exactly. The documentation is careful to note that his life remains a relentless, exhausting struggle behind closed doors.
It's that dual reality again. He's an inspiration to millions, but off camera, he struggles to tie his shoes or hold a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So we've seen the physical body failing, the neurological pathways degrading. But what happens when the body and mind are seemingly intact, but the emotional psyche is under absolute siege?
This brings us to a profound layer of the Hollywood experience. The psychological toll of the spotlight itself, compounded by invisible traumas the public knows nothing about. The pressure cooker of fame.
The research brings up some incredibly stark examples of immense, life-altering trauma hidden directly behind massive public success. Emilia Clarke is a perfect example.
Oh, her story is unbelievable.
While she was playing Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, projecting ultimate power on Game of Thrones, she miraculously survived 2 brain aneurysms. 2.
And George Clooney, the ultimate charming leading man, survived a silent life-or-death battle with spinal meningitis.
Right. If we look at the psychology of trauma, surviving a near-death experience fundamentally rewires your brain's perception of safety. An aneurysm is essentially a ticking time bomb in your head.
Exactly. For Emilia Clarke to be recovering from intense brain surgery, dealing with the terrifying realization of her own mortality, and then having to step onto a massive set.
Put on the blonde wig.
Yeah, put on the wig and project fierce, invincible power to hundreds of millions of people. The cognitive load required to maintain that facade is staggering.
It's completely insane. To be terrified, your brain might literally bleed out again. But having to scream commands in high Valyrian,
It's a huge burden.
and the documentation details a much broader mental battlefield across the industry. We have Catherine Zeta-Jones and Nicolas Cage managing severe bipolar disorder. Kristen Stewart hiding crippling anxiety behind her moody image.
And Selena Gomez, dealing with the physical devastation of lupus and a kidney transplant while battling anxiety and clinical depression.
This raises a massive structural question about the industry's "the show must go on" ethos. This industry demands an unnatural, almost superhuman level of emotional regulation.
When you sign that contract, you are obligated to be on. You have to smile enthusiastically on the press tour. You have to be gracious to the fans.
The pressure to smile through a depressive episode or suppress a panic attack while thousands of fans are screaming, it creates a toxic dual existence.
You essentially have to dissociate. You become alienated from your own pain because your pain is economically inconvenient to the production schedule. The studio cannot afford a panic attack.
I think of it like trying to perform a high wire act. You are balancing on this tiny thread over a massive chasm, but the wire itself is violently vibrating underneath your feet.
That is a brilliant analogy.
You're shaking, but the impossible catch is you have to smile, wave, and pretend the air's completely still. You can't let the audience know the wire is shaking or the illusion is ruined.
And the sheer energy required to pretend the wire is still is what eventually breaks people down. That pressure acts as an evolutionary crucible. For some, like Selena Gomez or Michael J. Fox, it builds empathy. They use their pain to advocate for others. But for others,
It completely corrupts them.
yes, for others, the pressure and wealth don't build empathy, they build walls. And the facade isn't hiding pain, it's hiding profound entitlement and toxic behavior.
And this is where our deep dive takes a very sharp turn, because we are leaving behind the stars who are tragic victims of biology and moving into the dark, ugly side of this documentation.
Faking wellness is one thing, but what about faking goodness?
Exactly. We are talking about America's sweethearts and the kings of comedy. The ones you explicitly thought were the nice ones.
This is perhaps the most intellectually jarring aspect of our deep dive, because it forces us to confront our own gullibility as an audience. It exposes how eagerly we project virtue onto entertainers.
Oh, totally. We fall for it every time.
Yeah.
Let's start with the most glaring example from the research. Ellen DeGeneres.
Yes, Ellen.
Her entire empire, her daily talk show, was built on the trademark slogan, "Be kind to one another." She was the dancing, benevolent beacon of TV. Yet, the documentation details absolutely shocking accusations.
It claims she created a severely toxic work environment, rife with intimidation, fear, and racial discrimination.
And it highlights a wildly specific, profoundly cruel anecdote that she once tried to get a waitress fired simply because the woman had a chipped fingernail.
What is structurally fascinating here is the mechanics of hypocrisy. When your brand, your monetization strategy is kindness, any deviation from that isn't just a boss having a bad day.
It's a breach of contract with the public.
Exactly. But let's look closer at that chipped fingernail anecdote because it is highly illustrative of celebrity pathology. Why a fingernail?
Right, why something so minor?
Because it demonstrates a micro-level abuse of power. Attempting to destroy a working-class person's livelihood over a cosmetic imperfection isn't about hygiene. It is about the exertion of absolute control over someone whose life is infinitely more precarious than yours.
That's a flex.
Yes. It reveals a chilling lack of empathy hidden directly behind a highly profitable smile. It's the ultimate expression of punching down.
It's the contrast that just makes your jaw drop. You expect the villain to act like a villain, but when the fairy godmother acts like a tyrant, it's deeply unsettling. And we see this exact same dynamic with Tobey Maguire.
The friendly, relatable Peter Parker.
Right. The guy who defined Spider-Man for an entire generation. But behind the scenes, particularly in underground high-stakes poker rings, a veteran casting director called him the worst little monster.
The anecdotes there are wild.
There was a strict, unwritten rule on his movie sets that regular crew members were simply not allowed to make eye contact with him. And then there's this infamous story, offering a waitress a $1,000 poker chip but only if she would get up on a desk and bark like a seal.
That incident is a clinical example of how extreme wealth and insulated fame breeds sadism. Offering someone money to perform a publicly degrading act isn't a joke. It is a sheer demonstration of dominance.
It reduces an autonomous human being to a circus animal.
Exactly. And the no eye contact rule, we see this pop up repeatedly with several high-level celebrities. It is a spatial manifestation of declaring yourself a superior caste.
You are not worthy of acknowledging my existence.
Yeah.
It makes you look at those original Spider-Man movies completely differently. You're watching him save Mary Jane, knowing the guy in the suit might demand you avert your eyes.
It really ruins the illusion.
And this cognitive dissonance happens with the comedy kings too. Jonah Hill, who built his career on being the funny, relatable guy, flying into an arrogant rage because a reporter accidentally mixed up his name with Seth Rogen.
And Chevy Chase, an absolute comedy legend, who the documentation says slapped a fan in the face at a comedy show and notoriously made his Community co-star, Yvette Nicole Brown, burst into tears with his toxic attitude on set.
It's just so disappointing.
What we are analyzing here is the halo effect. It's a cognitive bias where we assume that because a person possesses one positive trait, like being funny, they must naturally possess other positive traits, like kindness or humility.
We fundamentally conflate the art with the artist. We assume Chevy Chase is Clark Griswold.
Exactly. And the dangerous part is that the celebrity begins to believe their own PR. They are surrounded by an ecosystem of managers and assistants whose sole job is to remove all friction from their lives.
The ultimate yes man.
When you never experience friction, when no one ever tells you no, your ego expands to fill the vacuum. You lose the ability to regulate your emotions over minor inconveniences. A politely mixed up name becomes a massive, unforgivably perceived disrespect.
So I have to turn to you, the listener, right now. How do you process this information? Should we still support celebrities who act like massive, entitled jerks off camera? Does knowing Tobey Maguire demeaned a waitress ruin the Spider-Man movies for you?
It is an incredibly difficult line to walk.
Can you still laugh at Christmas Vacation knowing how Chevy Chase treated his co-stars?
Right, because we want to enjoy the art without endorsing the cruelty. And it brings us right into the next evolution of this behavior, where the entitlement stops being just rude and elevates to an almost theatrical level of control.
Yes, the demanding divas of Hollywood. The ego-driven madness of the A-list, where they test the absolute limits of what people will endure. Let's talk about Jennifer Lopez.
Jennifer Lopez is presented in the documentation as a veritable case study in extreme, unchecked diva behavior.
Extreme doesn't even begin to cover it. The research details claims that she spat her chewed gum directly into an assistant's open hand rather than finding a trash can,
Which is just vile.
and that she demands all her hotel rooms be decorated entirely in white. White flowers, couches, drapes, and most incredibly, that she requires subordinate staff to walk backward in front of her to maintain a designated distance.
If we break down the psychology of these specific demands, it becomes clear they aren't about comfort. They are fundamentally about control and subjugation.
Right, why does the room have to be white?
Demanding a room be entirely white is a way of forcing the environment to bend entirely to your will. It erases any trace of the previous occupants or the hotel's identity. It makes the space yours by force.
And making people walk backward.
That is a physical manifestation of forced reverence. Historically, that is how subjects were required to treat absolute monarchs. You never turn your back on the king. It is demanding that modern employees behave like feudal subjects.
And spitting gum into a human hand is the ultimate expression of viewing an employee not as a person, but as a literal receptacle.
It really is.
And J-Lo isn't the only one. The documentation brings up Ben Stiller. Apparently, he flew into a complete screaming rage because his glass of Diet Coke didn't have 2 identical ice cubes. Identical ice cubes.
And he reportedly made an assistant stand in his parking spot in the blazing sun just to save it for his car.
Unbelievable.
The identical ice cube story is fascinating from a psychological standpoint. It borders on obsessive-compulsive behavior, but it is weaponized against the staff. It's creating an impossible arbitrary standard simply to prove that you hold the power to fire someone if they fail to meet it.
And we can't ignore Julia Roberts,
Yeah.
the quintessential America's sweetheart. The research reveals that on the set of the movie Hook, she was so difficult that the crew nicknamed her Tinker Hell.
Yeah, that's a famously brutal nickname in the industry.
Her emotional states were so intensely disruptive that Steven Spielberg, arguably the most powerful patient director in Hollywood, reportedly stated he would never, ever work with her again.
To push Steven Spielberg to the point of public alienation requires a truly staggering level of difficult behavior. He is known for managing massive egos. For him to walk away speaks volumes about the toxicity of that specific environment.
And Mike Myers, the voice of Shrek. The documentation says he was considered an extreme, tyrannical perfectionist. He required a personal assistant whose sole job was to bring him chocolate on demand.
That is absurd.
And he created an invisible, hostile barrier between himself and the crew, refusing to interact and demanding absolute silence.
This is actually the perfect place to delineate between the concept of artistic perfectionism and unchecked narcissism, because Hollywood constantly confuses the two.
Okay, I want to push back on this a bit, though. I want to play devil's advocate, because this is the defense you always hear in Hollywood. Is this behavior just the necessary price of artistic genius?
Oh, the classic excuse.
Right. If Ben Stiller directs a brilliant comedy, does the audience really care if he yelled over ice cubes? Is tyranny just an unavoidable byproduct of a visionary mind?
That right there is the exact insidious myth that the Hollywood machine uses to protect and enable abusers. It's the torture genius fallacy. We need to dismantle that. True artistic perfectionism is about a relentless, shared dedication to the work. It is pushing yourself and inspiring your crew to achieve a collective vision. It's Stanley Kubrick doing 100 takes to get the perfect shot. It might be exhausting, but it serves the art.
Okay.
Unchecked narcissism, which is what these sources are actually describing, is about the relentless dedication to the ego.
So it's about power, not the product.
Exactly. Demanding identical ice cubes does not make the movie funnier. Having an assistant dedicated only to chocolate does not improve comedic timing. These acts are pure tests of power.
Designed to prove they can make people bend to their whims.
Yes, simply because they can. And the industry tolerates it because these people generate massive revenue. This creates an echo chamber of sycophants who never say no.
An echo chamber of yes that breeds absolute monsters. Because here is the terrifying reality. When nobody says no to the identical ice cubes, the behavior escalates. The boundaries get pushed further.
And that brings us to the darkest segment of our deep dive.
Yes, where the diva behavior curdles into actual violence, terrifying arrogance, and ultimate downfalls.
We are moving from bad manners into deeply dangerous, legally actionable territory. This is where the star loses touch with basic human decency and the rule of law.
Let's look at the physical aggression first. The research highlights Russell Crowe. The documentation states he actually threatened to kill a producer. Why? Because he felt his assistant was underpaid. He used a violent criminal threat of murder over a standard administrative dispute.
And he publicly called George Clooney a Frank Sinatra impersonator.
Then there is Christian Bale, famous for his method acting, whose volatile personality erupted in a notorious, utterly vulgar screaming match at his director of photography on the set of Terminator Salvation.
And the rumors that Bale would allegedly aggressively lecture young girls who approached him until they literally cried.
The Christian Bale incident is really illuminating. When you listen to the leaked audio of that rant, what you hear is a man who firmly believes his artistic process is sacred and that anyone who interrupts it is fundamentally worthless.
It is a complete loss of perspective. He is standing in a dark room, pretending to be a cyborg, treating the actual human beings making the movie possible like dirt. It shows how the isolation of method acting is frequently used as a shield for basic verbal abuse.
I'm not screaming at you, my character's screaming at you. It's such a cop-out. But hold on, doesn't the studio have a responsibility there? If a lead actor is screaming at a crew member, shouldn't producers step in?
In a normal corporate environment, yes, HR would be involved immediately. But on a movie set, the lead actor is the primary asset. The crew is considered replaceable. The hierarchy protects the revenue generator.
And because of that protection, it gets so much worse. The research outlines behaviors that cross straight into criminality. Terrence Howard has a dark, prolonged history of domestic violence with explicit criminal threats to kill his ex-wife.
And Charlie Sheen. His reckless lifestyle led to an HIV diagnosis, but much more shockingly, a long history of violent abuse allegations.
The documentation even notes him publicly calling Rihanna incredibly vulgar, misogynistic terms over a tiny, perceived misunderstanding.
With individuals like Terrence Howard and Charlie Sheen, we see a disturbing pattern where immense wealth and fame act as an impenetrable buffer against consequences.
In the normal world, repeated domestic violence derails your life. You go to jail.
Right. But in the entertainment industry, if your sitcom is pulling in 15 million viewers a week, entire studios will mobilize fixers, high-priced lawyers, and PR teams to bury the truth. Fame enables the darkest impulses by completely removing the societal guardrails.
That total lack of guardrails leads to absolute detachment from reality. Look at Johnny Depp and Jared Leto. Johnny Depp completely destroying a luxury hotel room, causing thousands in damages, and then bizarrely blaming the destruction on an armadillo. An armadillo.
And being accused of not even bothering to learn his lines for City of Lies, requiring an earpiece because he was so detached.
And then Jared Leto. This one is genuinely stomach-turning. Under the guise of method acting to play the Joker, the documentation details him sending live rats, sex toys, and literally used condoms to his co-stars.
The Jared Leto example is the ultimate grotesque corruption of the artistic process. Let's be absolutely clear. Sending biohazards and sexually explicit material to your colleagues is severe sexual harassment, period.
In any other industry, he'd be arrested.
Fired and arrested, yeah. But because he's an Oscar-winning actor and the studio is marketing a dark, twisted movie, it was spun by PR as intense method acting. It's a horrific example of reframing blatant abuse as commendable artistic commitment.
It's sickening. But as we look at all of this, it brings us to a really fascinating, highly complex paradox in our research. There is one name that appears in both halves of this deep dive, in two very different contexts. Bruce Willis.
Yes. This is perhaps the most philosophically challenging overlap in the entire set of documents.
Let's lay it out clearly. Earlier, we highlighted Bruce Willis as a tragic figure forced into early retirement due to aphasia and frontotemporal dementia. We talked about the tragic loss of his cognitive abilities.
Right.
But then way down in the documentation, under the section detailing arrogant celebrity behavior, Willis is lambasted. The research details a story where he was in a restaurant and two innocent 10-year-old boys laughed and pointed at him because they recognized John McClane.
And instead of ignoring them, Willis aggressively scolded and shouted at these children, deeply frightening them.
The research presents this as proof of his bitter impatience and his arrogant true self.
And this is where a deep understanding of neurology is absolutely essential. We have to connect the timeline and the pathology. FTD primarily affects the frontal and temporal lobes. The frontal lobe is the seat of our executive function.
It's the guardrails of the brain, the part that tells you, hey, maybe don't scream at a 10-year-old.
Exactly. When FTD sets in, long before the person loses their words, their personality fundamentally changes. They become irritable, deeply impulsive, and socially inappropriate. They literally lose the biological ability to read a room or feel empathy.
Wow.
So this raises a profound question. Was his terrible behavior in that restaurant the arrogance of an entitled celebrity? Or was it an early, unseen, tragic symptom of his brain physically deteriorating?
Was he just being a jerk, or was his hardware failing? Because if his brain was deteriorating, that completely reframes the entire narrative. He wasn't a diva. He was a patient in the early stages of horrific decline.
It completely reframes it. And it forces us to grapple with the limits of our own judgment. We are so incredibly quick to categorize public figures as either flawless heroes or irredeemable villains. We love binary narratives.
But human biology isn't binary.
Right. If a microscopic protein buildup in your brain is eroding the center of your cortex that tells you how to behave, are you morally culpable for that action? The media reported that incident as a diva meltdown, but in hindsight, it may have been a blaring medical red flag.
That makes you question every single tabloid story you've ever read. Fame acts like this giant, distorted funhouse mirror. It takes everything and twists it out of proportion.
It takes an actor's natural insecurities and blows them up into violent rages. It takes a singer's painful illness and turns it into a global tragedy.
And it takes early onset dementia and disguises it as celebrity entitlement. The reality we see is completely thoroughly warped.
And that warping effect is the ultimate takeaway from everything we've analyzed today. The silver screen, the red carpet, the curated PR, they form an impenetrable iron curtain between us and them.
An iron curtain. I love that visual. Let's bring all of this together to close this out. We started our deep dive standing on that imaginary red carpet, looking at those invincible smiles. But now we see what is really happening behind the velvet rope.
Yeah, the illusion is completely broken.
On one side of the curtain, facing the public, you have this perfectly curated, immortal image. Wolverine, the voice of God, America's sweetheart. But on the other side, shivering in the dark, you have fragile, mortal human beings.
You have some who are suffering unimaginable pain with staggering dignity, fighting their own mutating cells, their failing neurology, just to survive another day in the spotlight.
And then you have the others, The ones who allow the absolute power of fame to completely corrupt their souls. The ones who mistake a movie set for a feudal kingdom, who demand identical ice cubes and treat the people around them like disposable peasants.
The contrast is exactly what makes the psychological study of fame so compelling. It amplifies the best of human resilience, and it enables the worst of human cruelty.
We spend so much of our time and our hard-earned money idolizing these perfect images. We buy the tickets, we stream the albums, we defend them online, we buy into the illusion.
We all do.
But after going through all these incredible stories today, I want you to walk away and deeply consider this final thought. What if the greatest acting performance these celebrities ever gave wasn't captured on film?
That's a great point.
What if their true masterpiece is the perfect, flawless character they're forced to play in real life every single day, just to keep the multi-billion-dollar illusion alive? If that iron curtain fell completely to the floor right now and you saw exactly who they were, their hidden sickness, their crippling fear, and their capacity for cruelty, would anyone be left in the audience to applaud?